they don't want the capital to dictate as aesthetics. They don't want the capital to determine the role models for our youth.
Mira que ya viene la revolución, para que se asustan será pa' mejor. Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
The current Chinese regulation is targeting a specific group of celebrities. They're targeting a specific aesthetics, and they're talking about the K-pop aesthetics that started to come to China with the popularity of K-pop in more recent years. And what happened in China is that along with the open and reform and the introduction of market economy, what happens is in capitalism, people once people see something makes money, and there's like a rush into copycatting the same tactics. So that's what happened with popularity with K-pop when it was introduced into China. Then the host of the Chinese the whole of Chinese entertainment industry now suddenly shifted, trying to copycat the K-pop and all the K-pop aesthetics, with very pretty boys and so forth. So this is what this conversation about regulating the celebrity culture and entertainment industry was actually not new in China. This started back in 2018. So back then, the Chinese state TV, CCTV, published an editorial. It says, we shouldn't allow this kind of imported aesthetics to dominate the airwave and dominate all the entertainment industry in China, and not setting up a correct role model for the Chinese youth. But they use a derogatory word, liang pao, which in Western press is translated into sissy man. So in response, the People's Daily, another official mouthpiece of China, published a counter editorial, and it says we should not use that word liang pao. We should not use the word sissy man because it is derogatory. But if you actually read I read the content of both editorials. First, China people are very confused. It's like, why there's fighting between CCTV and People's Daily, right? Aren't both of them supposed to be the mouthpiece of the Chinese government, right? Yeah. Because in people's mind, China is this like monolith with like very efficient very efficiently oiled machine that with Xi Jinping snap of a finger from Xi Jinping, everything gets propagated to the bottom, right? That's not how it goes. China, just like any large society, is composed of a huge amount of people and different bureaucracy, different agencies, people with widely different ideas. I need to get that into people's heads. That's why we have this even editorial fight between two ostensibly mouthpiece of the Chinese government and Chinese Communist Party. You have the CCTV on one hand and People's Daily on the other hand. I managed to read both editorial, but what I've came out with that is that the actual content of the editorial was actually not so much different. It's that People's Daily editorial clarify a lot of things. What the People's Daily editorial is said is, you agree with the CCTV that the Chinese entertainment industry needs to be regulated. We should not allow capital to set the standards for our youth, right? But what it says then is we should not use derogatory words like liang pao, like sissy man. And People's Daily editorial specifically said the different gender expressions among general public should be respected. That's a very powerful statement coming from People's Daily. But what this says is this debate and also this most recent regulation is specifically targeted toward the entertainment industry. It's not like China is cracking down on gender expression, right? It's not like you can do whatever you want. But what they're concerned about is kind of this industry-wide rush to adopt the K-pop standards, K-pop aesthetics, and let's face it. K-pop is great. It offered a alternative to the Western, a purely Western pop. But at the same time, K-pop industry is very toxic. People can do research in that, Google that, and how that K-pop industry is being, how talents are being groomed. I intentionally use that word groom, and people can do research into that. So that's what the current Chinese regulation is aiming towards. But again, I'm not saying there's no social conservatives in China, right? Because like I said, China is a huge country. There's 1.4 billion people. There's probably 1.4 billion opinions. And I want to give people a more social historical context. I'm a little bit old. I was born in 1976 in China, and in 1982, when I went to first grade in China, this was the time China first experienced a reform opening. And I had this conversation with my classmates, first graders, were saying, "Oh, okay, now everything is opening up. Could we imagine, sometimes in the future when we grow up, we will be able to do PDA? We will be able to hold girls' hand in public. We would be able to even kissing in the street. Would you do that?" That tells you how much the world has changed in China from 1982 to 2021. So, you have my generation. I say China is every 10 years is a generation, because China changes so fast. Right. Not just physical change, that we can see with high-speed rail, with whole different cities popping up, but the social change as well. So you have to think about my generation experienced that kind of rapid change. What about my parents' generation, right? The youth of China today, the people who are born in 90s and 2000, they have a totally different mindset. Multiple survey has done in China that shows the Chinese youth acceptance of homosexuality is very high. In fact, the acceptance of different gender expressions among the Chinese youth is very high. But that might not be the case to an older generation, right? And to just more emphasis on this generation clash, I on my old podcast Clash actually interview a Chinese student who participated in the 1986 Chinese student protest in Shanghai. That's one of the first large-scale Chinese student protests in China since the Cultural Revolution. And he told me how it got started. In 1986, there was a famous American band. I have to look up which band now, because he was actually a famous band. They came to Shanghai to perform. And during the performance, they were inviting these young people to come up to stage to dance with them. And this was 1986. The security who were provided at the concert, they're super paranoid, and they don't want they don't want anything to happen to these American guests. So they start dragging people off the stage and detaining people. And so a lot of young people got really fed up with this kind of with this really suffocating a tactic. So they started a protest. This was the start of 1986 Chinese student protest in Shanghai. This is actually the predecessor to the eventual 1989 Tiananmen protest. But this is that kind of shows you kind of the generation gap also between the Chinese students in 1986 and the older generation who are more socially conservative, right? I mean, like, you know, in 1980s, even like mixed gender dancing in China in like private party was something that's to be frowned upon in in some circles.
Right.
So imagine the people, the conservatives in 1980s, you know, that would be my parents or maybe my grandparents' generation, who are now in 2021 and looking at all these changes in China, and they will, you know, there's a huge, let me just say, there's a huge generation gap in China. Okay, in terms of social issues, and you know, people in charge in like people in the censor board stuff, they are usually older. They're usually even an older generation than me. You know, I'm born in 1976. People who are like at the top level of the government right now, they're more like my parents' generation, right? So there's already like kind of there's that generation difference. So that's why you will see sometimes, you know, these kind of social conservative attitude sentiment gets leaked out into like editorial, even state media editorial, right? When people use words like "niang pao," "sissy man,"
Right.
But that actually caused a huge backlash on social media in China. You know, a lot of people criticize this use. They felt that it was inappropriate for state media to use that kind of language.
That's
Again,
really fascinating.
Yeah, and again, you know, China is not a monolith. It's composed of different generations. It's composed of 1.4 billion people, everyone with a different opinion. But we what we do know is that the current regulation is very specific. It's specifically targeting the entertainment industry. And in the recent press release from when the Chinese so the Chinese censor board, when they met with all the industry with all the big entertainment companies, they basically lay out the ground rules, and they specifically said they don't want the capital to dictate, as you know, aesthetics. They don't want the capital to determine the role models for our youth, and so this is what this means. Again, this is China, so different kind of regulations come out, and then some you know, sometimes this regulation could change within month. To give an example for people who are interested in the Chinese entertainment industry, in 2019 there was a edict from the Chinese censor board that says, you know, no more custom period dramas, no more period dramas. Like the TVs need to limit the airing of period drama to like 15% of the content in the golden hour. So people are like, oh no, this is what's going on. And then that ban was lifted like a month later in April 2019. And what ended up happening was the agreement among the Chinese censor board and all the media companies that they will submit their scripts and their schedules for approval. So he added an additional regulatory process. That's what ended up happening. So I suspect this is probably will be the result of this current round of regulation. There will be more regulation. There will be more eyeballs on the entertainment industry, and I think that's also because you know, the Chinese government have felt kind of the Chinese entertainment industry has grown a lot in the last 10-15 years, and they felt a lot of the development has gotten out of the hand. I don't know if people saw the news. The Chinese fans of BT, so Chinese fans of BTS is the K-pop band. They did a crowdfunding on Weibo to get get the BTS idol a customized airplane for his birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was big news. So in the end, Weibo shut down they didn't they muted the fan account for 15 days. So they're not allowed to post because, first of all, a lot of the K-pop fandoms, they're minors. They're usually teenagers, and that they're using their parents' money to to do all these things. So first of all, that's not something that their parents' generation look kindly upon. And so that this is why you see some of these regulations coming out of China. It's a reaction to some of the things that's been happening. So some people feel like all these things are getting out of hand. They have BTS fans buying up ad space in New York Times Square, and Chinese fans. There's Chinese K-pop fans buying up ad space in New York Times Square to celebrate their idol's birthday.
totally out of hand. But it just shows, like how you were saying, that China is doing a better job at not allowing their civilization, their people, to be dominated by capital. And I just want to read off a few good quotes and comments from people in the chat. Shout out to everybody who's watching and listening. By the way, Big Teal said, China is not a monolith. Mainstream media has no nuanced analysis about the complexity of Chinese government, culture, politics. Totally agree. That's exactly right. They make it seem like how you were saying earlier, Carl, that Xi Jinping snaps his fingers and everything is an agreement. Everyone thinks exactly the same. And it kind of harps on the same racist stereotypes about China being brainwashed, having, white people have inherent creativity and individuality, and Asians are just brainwashed. We've heard that expression that they use called hive mind to describe China. And it's just really disgusting. And this is just another example of that. And also, Big Teal's mentioning, I like K-pop music, but it's super exploitative. And Dust James said, K-pop, very convenient for the CIA's objective to glorify South Korea. And it's really true, because in many ways, K-pop has been used to fluff up and promote capitalism and neoliberalism in South Korea. And just to kind of glorify capitalism, glorify superficiality. I also find it interesting that of all the Asian countries, South Korea, occupied Korea, has the lighter skinned actors, and they use these whitening creams. And I feel like in the Chinese media, I see people of all backgrounds, all colors, all genders. And it's one of those things that I think is really interesting to see, because we also have something very similar in Latin America and Latin American media, where they promote just the lighter skinned, whiter Latinos and purposefully eliminate indigenous and Afro-descended Latinos from media.